Hi everyone! Welcome to Tuesday D&D Dungeons and Damphy. I'm Kay, I'm your host. I'm here with my co-DM and my home game DM, David Lee, my partner in crime.
Hello.
Hello, Steve! Thank you for hanging out. Steve is DMing me in a project that we'll be talking about hopefully soon.
Ooh.
But yes, welcome to Tuesday D&D. I'm your host, Kay, and before we start, I would like to say thank you to Bardly.io for the chill tunes you hear in the background, hopefully, and to Web Captioner for the captions, which you can actually read even if you can't hear us, because, hey, this is cool. We're professional-ish.
Right? And actually, that does make it easy because when I fire up your stream for Poke Monday, if I'm working and I can't listen to stream because I have to listen to what I'm working on, I can still keep track of what's going on by reading the captions. Though
Yeah.
It is an interesting skill to hear something and type it while reading something different at the same time without making any mistakes.
Definitely a challenge. So yes, captions are awesome, not just for the people who need them. They're great for everyone else. I have my captions on. Dude, the best thing about Critical Role being pre-recorded is that their captions are frickin' spot on.
Yeah.
And their transcriptionists are so good that someone will use a double negative and they get cheeky about it in the captions. They use an emphasis and I'm like, my English major heart. So yes, today's topic is The Legend of Vox Machina and other tabletop and D&D adaptations. So, Vox Machina is very clearly on our minds. David just binged all of the animated series. I've had to have it in drips and drops because I was lucky enough to get to see the first 6 episodes a month before they aired for everyone else. But that meant I had to sit for a month and be like, I can't talk about this to anyone, and I gotta wait a month and a half before I get any new stuff, and it hurt. It really hurt.
Ooh, pain. Lots of pain.
It was lots of pain. But I can very carefully, spoiler-free, talk about the final 3 episodes. However, I have to talk very, very carefully because my list of
do not talk about is quite long.
Yeah, which
is fair.
It's complex, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but yeah, I can't wait for critters to see it. So we've got a couple topics we're going to cover, and if you have questions about different things, or if you want to chime in with a D&D or tabletop game adaptation that you've seen, please do, and we want to talk about it. Because
game adaptations.
There are, there's Clue. Can we just talk about how Clue is just a brilliant adaptation of a board game? Not quite a tabletop RPG, but
is Clue still the finest board game adaptation in history?
Probably. I don't know. Isn't there a Battleship one coming out?
Listen, no, Battleship. Okay.
Yes, I triggered him.
There's so much about Battleship that I don't remember, including the overpriced CGI. But it had Rihanna in it, and she was hot, and that's all I needed. Unfortunately, that's all the charm the film had.
Unlike Clue, which flames.
Clue. Here's the thing. What's his name?
Tim Curry?
Yes.
I love how I knew.
Yeah, Tim Curry is one of the finest actors that has ever lived, and has iconic performance after iconic performance. There are people who are like, I discovered my sexuality because of Tim Curry.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to go,
right.
Which Tim Curry was it?
Right. Because it's not just, everyone immediately goes to Rocky Horror, but also Clue, right. But also Fern Gully. He awoke a lot of people in Fern Gully.
The person I was speaking about was like, listen, I was not old enough for the Rocky Horror thing,
Beauty and the Beast too.
I saw Fern Gully, and why did they make Sludge sexy? This is a problem.
And here's the other, which I don't know if you know, but apparently is an entire thing that I learned about because I work on the internet. there was a whole lot of sexual awakening around Tim Curry's performance in the Barbie Nutcracker movie. Just take some time to absorb that. Let it wash over you. Let it wash over
That
you. This
hurts.
is a thing.
What what upsets me most is I now have to go dig that up
You have
and
to.
figure out what they're talking
It's a
about.
3D movie too. Like a not the good, not like a Pixar 3D. I
If
will be
I am
punished for
struck
that
by
later.
lightning right now, if I'm struck by lightning right now, someone is going to see on my computer Barbie Nutcracker, and I will not be around to defend myself.
If I come back next week and I'm like, y'all, my Paladin of the Flying Spaghetti Monster died in this
Right.
weekend session,
Just hit by lightning.
this is why. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I think Clue is probably up until Vox Machina, honestly, like the best
Yep.
adaptation. I really like. Because we were talking about, I'm like, did you watch any of the Dungeons and Dragons movies? And he's like, I might have watched one, but I don't. And I was like, have I watched a Dungeons? I don't think I've watched a Dungeons and Dragons movie. And so I was like, well, we're gonna talk about this, so like, I'm gonna go watch one. It is not streamable anywhere without paying, and I can't decide if that is because A, no one wants to pay anyone for the rights to stream that movie, or B, they don't want to let anyone stream it for free so that people can't like just go rail on Rotten Tomatoes on it. There's three of them. There's three of them, and I know
There's
so many Dungeons and Dragons players. I don't know any who have seen it.
yeah. Because why?
I was even looking. I'm like, okay, like let's just, what can we? And I'm looking like the one dude had like blue lipstick and red ears, and I'm like, what? I'm far from a master of cosplay, but my D&D cosplay is Will Wheaton or the other guy. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
But so one of the things that's talked about a lot in D&D is combat and how combat works and the limitations thereof when it comes to um, the Dungeons and Dragons systems. And people have different complaints about different systems throughout the history of Dungeons and Dragons. But I was really interested in how they treated combat in the series. And there were a couple of like.
Do you mean Vox Machina or do you mean the stream? Like the actual
Vox
play?
Machina?
Okay. Just making
in
sure.
the animated series. And the one thing that I was really, really, really pleased with is they always made sure to incorporate a lot of movement into combat.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the complaints about D&D is that because there's so many penalties to moving through a battlefield,
Right.
which makes sense because if you're in a real fight and you're walking by and somebody's like, okay, well, poke. But
we can get George R. R. Martin up on this. Like he shouldn't move. He should wear his helmet because if he doesn't wear his helmet, it's gonna be bad.
right, and I'm glad they didn't limit themselves in that regard. But let us. There's a lot going on in Vox Machina, and it's interesting because you've seen everything that there is Critical Role.
Almost
and
everything.
I've watched some Exandria Unlimited, and I've seen like clips and bobs here and there, but I haven't like sat down and watched Critical Role all the way through. And so it's interesting to see these characters and the situations that they're in without having all of the background, which I know is there.
And I've had a lot of people ask me, like, I don't watch Critical Role. Can I watch Legend of Vox Machina? And I would say resounding yes.
Absolutely.
I feel like, and you can answer this for me, David, but I've spoken to another person who watched no Critical Role. Or watched, my friend Jess, who's amazing, has watched the Mighty Nine Campaign 2, but has watched none of Campaign 1. So while she knows the actors, she doesn't know any of these characters. And I feel like you can definitely tell in the show when jokes are being made, when a joke is being referenced, when something that happened, there's nods to things that happen at the table that are not incorporated into the show itself. But I don't feel like if you don't get that joke, you feel like you don't know the joke, but you also don't feel completely left out.
Um, the one that keeps coming back is the fact that doors are a problem. And even if you don't know the context of that, they still did a really good job of like
It became a running joke. Yeah, in Vox Machina multiple times, like Vax ended up at one point, I think, taking 4 points of piercing damage because they couldn't get a door open.
yikes. Yikes.
It was just it's ongoing, and now they're facing it again in campaign 3. Doors are back. Campaign 2, chairs were the enemy, and now we're back to doors.
But there are a couple things. Well, there are lots of things I really like about the show. But from a Dungeons and Dragons perspective, there are a couple things I really like. One is so there's this balance between your roles going bad and you being sort of like an everyman that came from a village in the middle of nowhere to doing great things. And even after doing those great things, depending on what level you are and the situations you faced, you could do something that really impacts a village or town or country and still not necessarily be all that powerful. And so they do a good job of basically, these are a bunch of chuckle fucks, and oh my god, how did they end up in front of the king? And oh my god, why do they have to go do this thing now?
Mm-hmm.
And then they do it, and they're like, well, how do we do this? I don't know. But then there's this moment of like focus where they stop fooling around and everybody turns to the problem and is like, okay, well, we're gonna work together, we're gonna do this. And they do a good job of, in several instances, showing how the chemistry of the party is, we all have different goals, we all have often conflicting personalities, but at the end of the day, we work together as a unit, even if it doesn't seem that way.
Yeah, and really, like, by the end of Vox Machina, like, I mean, not even by the end, by pretty early into the stream, Vox Machina were starting to refer to themselves as a family, right? We are a family. And coming from that, from knowing that, feeling them just barely holding together at the beginning of the first 2 episodes of the animated series was just, it was so different, and it was equal parts painful and comforting. Painful because these people are not who they're going to be yet, but exciting because you know that's where they're going to go. So that was really cool. And we saw them splintering in the first 2, and then we see them start to form a team as they start going through this horrible event in Whitestone.
Yeah, Whitestone, very spicy. Very spicy.
And without saying anything too much, it's that's going to be tested even further in the next 3 episodes.
I'm sure.
I also, you were talking about combat earlier, and this is actually one of the things I got to speak to the cast about, because I was lucky enough to get to interview the cast for Gaming Trend before the series came out. And one of the things that really stood out to me was, part of the challenge is how do you write around, oh, I couldn't do this spell because I only have a limited number of spell slots, right? There's all these mechanics that you don't want to drop into a fantasy narrative. And so if you watch, like, Keyleth had a hard time, and of course, they're also dancing around D&D properties. So you'll notice it's always the Everlight. It's never Sarenrae, right? They're moving around these things. So, like, Keyleth had a lot of trouble casting the Daylight spell, which is a spell a druid should just be able to cast. Like, why is that? And so Sam actually had this really beautiful, eloquent answer about, like, we stepped back and we started looking less about what are the mechanics and more about, well, why couldn't they do this? if they had rolled a 1, why did they roll the 1? Well, because they were injured, they were distracted, they were too afraid, they doubt themselves. And then they were able to build all the narrative around why they were or were not able to do this thing. Why did they hit that nat 20? Oh, because he's worried for his sister, so he's able to do this super cool thing. And I really loved that approach, as opposed to like, I don't feel like I can do it right now. Which would have set this in a very different tone.
And also talking about the D&D experience, they do a good job of folding in a lot of Dungeons and Dragon tropes.
Mm-hmm.
So
the opening scene
is in a tavern, and there's a bar fight. And something that has become a trope more, I'd argue, in later D&D than early D&D is that actions have consequences long term.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've gone from the dungeon crawl where you open the chest at the end, get the magic thing, and then get out of there, to these are living, breathing worlds with narratives, and if you do something, good or bad, there are going to be consequences. Because there's this throwaway line of like, let's go get the other mercenaries that are like good, and it's like, oh well, we could, except one of them got their hand cut off, and then the party kind of shares a look, and they're like, and another important element, which we'll go deeper into when it comes to character building, when we do an episode on character building, is that people, it takes a special kind of person to be an adventurer. Mm-hmm. It takes a special kind of person to be a mercenary, and to either not have a home or to leave your home, you've had to experience some things that put you on this path. And while on this path, you are looking for something. Like, Caliph is looking for a way to prove herself, and Percy is looking for revenge, and Scanlan is looking for the next place to park himself. But all the characters are looking for something, and they're looking for the thing that's missing inside them. And for adventurers and for mercenaries and D&D parties, having something that you're looking for outside of the bucket of gold, at the bottom of the dungeon, is really important, because that drives so many of the characters' actions.
I'm sorry, I had to grin like... I was grinning like mad, because that becomes such a big point later in Vox Machina's story, but I'm not going to say when or how, because we're nowhere near there.
Right. And then they also go into like party composition, how party composition is important, because you have, like, they're getting just the shit kicked out of them in a bunch of fights, and they're looking real rough. And there is Pike a paladin or a cleric?
She's a cleric.
She's a cleric, yeah. And their cleric nowhere to be found, and they're just looking at each other, and they're like, oh. Like, at one point, Caliph starts a fire, Keyleth starts a fire, accidentally sets what's his name on fire, and my first thought was, oh shit, they don't have their cleric there to like, or Scanlan is trying to help with the door and like cuts his fingers, and it's like, that's just there.
Yep.
And just in so many ways, they highlight the important parts of not just D&D as an experience, but like the important things that you need to consider. Mm-hmm. For instance, not in every D&D campaign, but in way more D&D campaigns I thought, there's a sloppy prison break. just in every game I've run, except for the one we're running now, and I
Oh,
think
don't
one
tempt me,
other.
sir. Don't give
There's
me
been a
ideas.
sloppy Prison Break in it, and the Vox Machina Prison Break is the sloppiest prison break in the history of prison breaks. Like, they
No.
fought an entire garrison inside the prison.
So, here's a fun factoid, which we were connoisseurs of the Vox. We're wondering, like, if they were going to do this, how they were going to do this, how it was going to be. So the reason that Pike was not there was that Ashley Johnson was filming. What's her show?
What's the name of the show?
I know, I'm drawing a blank.
I've watched like 3 seasons of it.
Yeah, it's not Breakpoint, not Dark Point. It's a investigate. I apparently can't that word tonight.
Blind Spot.
Blind Spot. She was in New York filming Blind Spot, so she was in my time zone, and like just watching Critical Role at that hour is hard, and she often had like 6 a.m. call times to set. So sometimes even if she could make it, she couldn't necessarily stay up until 3, 4 in the morning because she had to go be professional the next day. So they unexpectedly they had her leave the party because she was going to New York. She couldn't come in and play, and she unexpectedly was able to teleconference in for an episode, and so they made her astral project, and then they found a great incorporation for it in the show.
Yes. I remember when what's her name starts raising the dead in the town. I thought to myself, gee willikers, it'd be sure nice if they had someone who could turn undead.
Right? And when
That
she
sounds
pops
like
in
that'd
and
be
drops the
useful.
destroy undead. And so, one of the other things, I'm like, okay, David, when you reach this part, speaking vaguely, let me know. And then I'd send him a clip. I'm like, don't watch all this, but like, watch this. So there are a couple moments, like, and the one I can say, very comfortably spoiler free, is the first time that Taliesin hears the name Briarwoods in the game. Because at this point, they'd been playing for about 2 years. He's been with the group. He hasn't heard anything about his backstory. And not every D&D game dives super deep into backstories. And honestly, the reason they started with the Briarwood arc is this is kind of the point in the game in which they stop being like mercenary murder hobos, like just chasing the money, and started like being more cinematic and being more character focused. And part of the reason all the romance ramped up right around this time was that they started realizing, oh, I really like this character, and maybe this character really likes that character. And they actually had a whole talk about, can we do? We know we can romance NPCs. Can we romance other characters? Is that legit? And so they've been playing about 2 years, and then Matt just casually, and I made David watch this because it's just the most wonderful, and they're all, they're at the audience, the king, and they're, at this point in the stream campaign, they're a little less chucklefuck than they are at this point in the animated series. Like, they've been on a couple missions for the king, they're fairly established, right? And they're like, hey, will you take this to Lord Briarwood? And the guy takes it and walks off. And the whole thing continues. Everyone's still talking, and then you just see Liam in the corner going,
Yep. Like, just complete short circuit.
yeah, blue screen. Pinwheel is going in front of Liam as you just see, like, all the implications of this, right, going before his eyes. And, like, yes, when Percy, like, the moment in the show when Percy realizes the Briarwoods are there, it's dramatic, and it's everything you'd expect from a pseudo-anime. But nothing will ever beat that blue screen moment.
Yeah.
And the moment, again, between... There's no way I can say this without at least a little bit of spoil, but the moment between Keyleth and Vax, again, it's a good moment.
Yep.
They did it great in the show, but nothing will ever beat the out-of-character reaction to that. Watching the player react is just... So, there's no way for a show to capture that. And I could never fault a show for not capturing that. But because I have, through the course of this, become fans of, yes, the characters and yes, the story, but also the players. And I do feel like I'm missing, not half, but a good, really important chunk of the story. Unfortunately, we live in a time with like Twitch clips where I can just be like, clip, David, watch this. This is what you're missing. You don't have to watch the whole campaign, but I need you to see what happened out of character because this moment's better than you thought it was.
Weird.
No, you're weird.
But, and that brings up an interesting point that I've spoken spoken a lot about over the years, especially with my writing partner, is the different ways that you have to tell stories and how those stories are impacted by your format.
Mm-hmm.
And part of why, in terms of video games, RPGs are so valued and so loved and so dear to a lot of people's hearts, because anybody who plays RPGs has like not just the one that they absolutely love, but the character from that series that they absolutely love. Right. And part of that is you spend so much more time with the characters than you would in a movie,
Mm-hmm.
or even with most TV shows, because you'll play Oblivion or Morrowind, or the big one, Skyrim, that everybody has played a whole lot. Like, I've played it the least of a bunch of people I know, and I think the last time I looked, I had 126 hours played.
Mm-hmm.
And so you spend hundreds and hundreds of hours in these games with these characters, living their stories and hanging out with them while like little things happen and big things happen, that you get much more emotionally invested in them than you would in, say, a character in a movie that's an hour and a half long.
And you also, they react to your decisions, right? In most RPGs, you make decisions and they react to what you did. So, like, you will even make a decision based off of what you know they will like. Or not. Or you make a bad decision and you reset the game because you hurt their feelings, and that's unacceptable.
Absolutely.
And how can you sleep at night, right? So, it's a really, really fascinating pseudo relationship is correct, but it's not the word I'm looking for. Anyhow, it's driving me bananas when you have a relationship, when you feel like you have a relationship with a celebrity. Parasocial. It's a very fascinating parasocial relationship. And I'm like, let's be clear, parasocial relationships are often thrown around as like a very bad thing, and they can be problematic, but like parasocial relationships are completely normal and have been part of human existence since like books. Since we started telling stories, we've had parasocial relationships, so they're not bad unless you let them take you to a place. But like, it's a fascinating parasocial relationship where you really feel like you know this character, and TTRPGs are extra potent in that because you're having a parasocial relationship with one of your friends' characters. So you extra feel stabbed in the back when you feel like you know your friend and you feel like you know what they do, and their character does something different. Their character has betrayed you. It's powerful. And
super bad.
That emotion translates so potently into an adaptation like Vox Machina.
And yeah, it's interesting the difference between the critters and people like me who haven't seen it, and their approach to these characters and their connection to these characters.
But you should all just love No Mercy Percy. No Mercy Percy is best Percy. That's all.
Listen, another thing that surprised me is how hard it was to pick a favorite character. Because at first you're like, oh man, this character. Wait, but this character.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't expect, and I'm a little mad that Grog made me feel things.
Grog is so amazing.
Like, it's unacceptable that a big dumb barbarian made me feel my feels.
Grog is so
Uh,
Grog will make you absolutely bananas at points in the series, but Grog is so here's the other thing too. Grog and Scanlan are as close friends as they are because they spend all their time in the whorehouses. Because Grog is not interested in relationships, but he does like lady favors.
I mean, fair.
And
Super fair.
it was really fascinating to watch. So for those of you who don't know, Grog has an intelligence score of 6. And that means Grog is not smart enough to be able to write or read.
To put that in perspective, because I did a lot
Keep
of
talking. What's
research
that?
about character scores when I was building out some encounters for different games, including when we were working on Godblade. 6 is the bare minimum to understand language and respond to language.
Grog at one point, and I don't know if it'll make it into the show or not, got polymorphed into a giant eagle and was smarter as a giant eagle than he was as Grog.
Yo, that's
Also,
yo.
so they sent us like this whole like deed to the part of the press kit that I got. Is they sent us, the whole deed to the thing. But look at Grog's signature.
that's ooh, that's
It's so
fantastic.
good.
That is oh, that is spot on.
So a lot of people were like, and again, we're gonna talk a lot about characters. It took the longest. It absolutely. Pike was
Right.
holding the pencil, had her hand over his the whole time. One of the things we're gonna talk about on here, we're gonna get to it. We've got a lot of topics to cover. Is I'm bringing on Kato, and we're gonna talk about chaotic characters, but like we're gonna call it constructive chaos, because a lot of people don't like chaotic characters because they can like derail and ruin a campaign. And look, I'm prone to
Absolutely.
derailing. I love derailing the party and making them chase red herrings and make David heavy sigh and have to get us back on track because I deliberately threw out a red herring and I knew everyone would fall for it. Um, but there's also like there is a outside of Mothership where I am playing an android, which those scores are it's a D100 system. So my android's intelligence score is 52, I think, and all the humans average at around mid 20s. So outside of that, I have not played a character with above 9 intelligence in years. And part of me gets frustrated because I'm a theory crafter. David knows. I will be incredibly cunning. I will try to come up with explanations. I love it. But there's also just a freedom in playing the character that is so dumb that they will ask the obvious question. And there's a way to be intelligently dumb. There's a way to do a smart thing for a dumb reason that is in character. And those are so difficult and yet so rewarding to play. Dumb is so much fun. And because Travis has the physicality that he does, Travis was a football player. Travis is a big, muscular, jock looking guy. And he is so intelligent that if you actually watch how Grog is played in the show or in the stream, that man is brilliant. That man plays dumb so intelligently. And if you don't know the difference between intelligent dumb and like bad dumb, you haven't played with a good dumb character. It's so much fun.
Yeah, because low intelligence scores gives you an opportunity to be clever and witty in the exact opposite way.
Right.
And there are a lot of like very simple throwaway one-liners in Vox Machina for Grog. Like Scanlan goes, "Let's see what this baby can do," and he's like, "Got a baby in there? How'd you get a baby?" And it's just like,
Yeah. And
and there's a
Steve just said it correctly. You have to be very smart to play a dumb player, to play a dumb character.
right, and when so I've lost the
Oh
thread of
no.
what I was
Oh
thinking
no.
about.
Dumb brilliant one-liners from Grog.
Right. And so like I said, it provides you a lot of opportunity to be clever, um, and it also gives you a lot more freedom than playing a high intelligence character.
Hmm.
Because if you're playing a wizard with like 21 intelligence, like I'm not that smart, and so it it's intimidating to try to play a character that is going to be that sharp.
Hmm.
Um, and it also gives you opportunities to differentiate between intelligence and wisdom.
Hmm.
And a a high intelligence player and a high int low wisdom is a very easy villain, like
Hmm.
just very easy villain. But just like with Grog, you could get these big, wholesome, um, team building storytelling moments with a character that has low int but is wise enough to understand different things. Like when Grog is like when Pike is leaving, he's like, "Okay, I'll go with you," and she's like, "Nah, they need you," and he's like, "Yes, but what if I need you?" And it's just like, oh, oof,
Wait,
oof.
wait until there's a cute conversation about I just want to, what do I do? I don't get to do nothing in one of the upcoming episodes that just melted me. But yes, and
And
that's and I'm gonna go off at some point about I have strong opinions about like edgelords and like the strong super cool characters and like Grog could have been like Grog's relationship with Pike is part of what makes him such an endearing character. The fact that this huge massive thing just loves the hell out of this little tiny gnome, right? And if you're gonna do an edgelord, that's part of what you got to do. That's my pre. Most people do edgelords wrong. You can play an edgelord in a TTRPG and make the party love them while still keeping that edgelord thing. If you just give the players, the characters don't have to, but the players a glimpse behind the curtain. And Grog is an
right,
excellent way to do that.
and going back to the idea of these adventurers are missing something. Um, Grog has found the thing that he's missing.
Hmm.
Like as long as he's with Pike, it doesn't matter what he's doing because everywhere he goes with Pike is home.
And
Um,
continue your thought. Continue your thought.
um, and so it's a big moment, and there are a couple of moments like later after that episode where Grog is visibly like not just upset but a little lost because he has now lost that thing that has become central to him. And and when it comes to edgelords, you have both Vax and Percy, and they do a really good job of making it clear that yes, these are strong-willed people. They're tough. Percival is elegant, and Vax is very cutthroat. But you have to demonstrate that they're still people and they still feel things and they still care.
Hmm.
Um, and the easy one is when Vax gets the piece of silver from the kid.
Hmm.
But what I thought was even better is a conversation between Keyleth and Percy while they're riding back to Whitestone.
Hmm.
Um, and she's like, "Oh, your rustic bitch face," and a dyed in the wool, like super unforgiving edgelord would just take great offense and be really butthurt about it. Um, and he has this like serious moment, and then at the end he breaks it with a joke.
Hmm.
And it's one of the few pieces of levity we see from Percival the whole series, but it shows
Excuse
him
me,
as
excuse
this.
me. I fell out the window.
Right, right, and again, it was super deadpan. Like he went up there, rolled a one, and down he came. Um, and it's just like you have this character that can be described as an edge lord that is given more dimension by the intelligence of the player and the way it's executed.
I will also say that not only is she the Xena of the Vox Machina, of the critters, and caused a number of bisexual and lesbian awakenings, but the biggest edgelord of the Vox Machina crew is Vex herself. Vexalia is the biggest edgelord, and I don't remember if it made it into the animated series. I honestly don't, because my brain is full of too many Critical Role things. Right now, I'm also reviewing the Tal'Dorei Reborn book right now, so I'm just like...
All Critical Role all the time.
Yeah, like, and what's happened in the original campaign versus what's in the animation versus what's in the notes of, like, what happened in the 20 years since the end of the campaign to the Tal'Dorei Reborn source book. My brain is just jumbling it back. But at one point, you know, everyone sees Vex and Vax, and they see them as these hardened, you know, streetwise orphans, and they all turn to Vex when it's time to try to convince the twins to stick it out to stay with them. They all turn to Vex because she's the woman. And one of the best lines in all of freaking Critical Role is, like, at one point Vax has said his thing and walked off, and they turn to Vex and they're trying to reason with her, and she just leans in and she's like, "I'm not the nice twin," and walks the fuck away. And if you watch that show, Vax is the one who's like, "We're protecting the kids. We're gonna, you know, we need to stay with the group." Vex is like, "It is you and me versus the world. Let's get out of here." And yet she does not come off as... I mean, she's a little bitchy at times, but you wouldn't classify her as, like, super cold, because they really showed that relationship with her brother. They really showed her warming up to Percy. They really showed her mistrust of Keyleth moving to, like, okay, maybe, like...
Maybe I'll give this person a shot. And also how she... she's the first one to step forward and try to get serious about things. When things are coming apart, things are scattered, they need some sort of plan of action. She's the first one to be like, "All right, we're all here, let's do this.
Yep.
Here's the plan."
And also she has Trinket.
Right.
And one of the moments that didn't make it in... Oh, do I want to... Okay, I don't know if it'll make it into future shows. It might, but, like, so she and Vax, they found Trinket as a cub and raised Trinket together. So while Trinket is Vex's companion animal, Trinket and Vax are also, like, really, really close. But Vax is a frickin' prankster. So at one point, while Vex was away, Vax went out and got just yards and yards and yards of pink ribbons and just tied pink bows all over Trinket. So she came back to this bear just covered in pink bows.
My absolute favorite moment in the entire series is they go to see the king, and they're like, "The bear has to stay out here," and they're like, "All right." And then they're walking out, and the guards are like, "Wait a second." And I was just like, I'm so glad they did that, because, like, yeah, no, I feel like Trinket has been around people enough where Trinket's like, people are cool until they're not.
Yeah.
And then when they're not, I eat them.
Trinket is very good at following orders from two people. Exactly two people. Maybe Keyleth sometimes, but two people really good at following orders from.
And they're also doing a good job of sort of blurring the factions in the party, because, you know, you have Vex and Vax, and you have Pike and Grog, and you have Grog and... well, yeah, and then you have Grog and Scanlan, and so he starts to... And then Keyleth, like, and Vax are starting to be a thing, and
Keyleth and Percy are good friends. Oh no, I'm motivating you to finish it. I mean, yay? It's not... The final 3 episodes come out Friday, so...
I'm very careful about TV shows that I recommend to people, just because different people like different things, and I tend to like things that are either darker than like your average person wants to watch, or just some things are just off the walls and
Mhm.
bananas. And I'll be the sort of person to be like, you should watch this movie because the costume design is excellent. Um, and some people aren't quite that niche when it comes to what they watch, but actually um, back to D&D tropes and the D&D experience. One thing that I'm super 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 happy about is that the D&D format lends itself to many different types of stories.
Mhm.
And this is the first big fantasy thing that I've seen in a long time where it was not the hero's journey.
Yeah. There's definitely some hero's journey in this. And maybe not in this particular arc, but you're going to get there.
Right. But it's literally a bunch of people who are like, maybe we could do this. And I was completely mystified that they took down a blue dragon in episode 2. I was like, okay, where do you go from here? You've killed 8. And
Oh,
again,
oh, just wait.
D&D
Oh,
tropes,
ooh.
fight a dragon.
There's so
Actually,
much I
they
can't
got
say
both
about
because
what's
they've
coming,
been in dungeons and
and they
they fought
fought
a
a
dragon.
dragon.
Check, check.
Um, oh frick, there was something I was gonna say, and it just flew away from my tiny little brain. I
But
will
we're talking about
say,
tropes.
Jen, if you are, without spoiling the upcoming 3 episodes, one of the upcoming episodes has some of the best action animated fight sequence I have seen ever. It is up there for me with the Samurais versus Ninjas episode of Samurai Jack, and that's very high praise. See, I've seen very little dragons, maybe like one or two. Um, yeah, I mean, you can't be all dragons all the time, or else, you know. It is interesting to note too how well they have blended this party, because in so this by the time they reached this point from the original streamed campaign, they'd been playing for about 2 years, but not all of them had been playing for 2 years. This started as a birthday present from Matt Mercer to Liam O'Brien. Liam was like, I haven't played D&D since college. Would you run me a game for my birthday? And Laura Bailey and he actually have the same birthday. So that's why they played twins, because it was technically a birthday present for both of them. And then Liam brought his best friend Sam, um, and um, Laura brought her husband Travis. And I'm going to be honest, I can't remember right now if Matt and Marisha were already together at that point. I think I think they were, but Marisha joined there. So they were the original group. And then Ashley joined later. Ashley wasn't one of the originals. She joined a little bit later. And for reasons I won't, because I'm sure they're going to flash back to it at some point, but when Pike originally joined the party, she had black hair. She wasn't blonde. That's a whole character arc that they have not discussed yet. And they actually had another player who was playing a Dragonborn, and we don't really talk about that, but there was a player who ended up leaving the stream after a while, because of reasons. And actually, Percy was the most recent addition to the entire party, and they found Percy. They were doing a different jailbreak, and they found Percy locked in a prison and busted him out. And he came along because Matt was like, "Hey, Taliesin, so like I've got this home game I'm running with all of these voice actor people, and they're really really awesome, but like not all of them know that much about D&D, and I kind of need someone who's a little more on the rails and kind of just knows how the game works to kind of keep the." Talison's like, "Yeah, I got that." And that's how the group was born.
Um, so we've skirted around it, but as someone who has seen the streams and the show, what other, like at least within this arc, what other big differences are there?
Um, they did a really nice job of pulling in some of the really important things. Have I ever seen Red Dwarf? I have not seen Red Dwarf. Is that a thing we
Me
need to...
neither.
Tell us what Red Dwarf is. Please, Jen. So Scanlan had this whole arc where he broke into this house and picked a fight and turned into a Triceratops. And they fit that in. And, a lot of these... Okay, I will watch Red Dwarf, I promise. So, one thing about the show is it has 8 creative directors.
Yep.
Because every single one of them was a creative director on the show. Now, one thing about the show versus the stream, Gilmore is not in it nearly as much in the show, which is a crime, because Gilmore is amazing. It is hinted at in the animation, but Gilmore and Vax were actually had a bit of a relationship and went on a couple dates and got day drunk together. So that was a big change. Percy's arc is pretty solid because this is obviously his arc. And something I'm very grateful for. So, and I actually got to talk to Matt and Marisha a little bit about this when I interviewed them. But I started with Campaign 2. I didn't start with Vox Machina. The Mighty Nine were my first Critical Role party. And by that point, they had already come to an understanding that a lot of people were watching this, and this was a big social thing. So by that point, they were already trying to be much more socially conscious. They were cleaning up a lot of their language, a lot of the... There's a lot of really tropey things that happened in the original stream. And not tropey as in like a D&D trope, but like sexist tropes and like gender... Like, the prostitutes in the original arc were not great. Prostitutes in Campaign 2 were still there, but they were actually generally much more interesting. And had some volition beyond, oh, I'm just here to do this. So there were some elements of Campaign 1 that, especially having come from a much more wholesome and inclusive Campaign 2, were kind of a slap in the face. I especially found a couple things problematic as a woman. And most of those have been cleaned up or removed entirely. So I didn't get a straight answer out of if that was like conscious of like, hey, we need to... They really wanted to keep... One thing that the group were really, really insistent about was they wanted to keep it violent. They wanted to keep it gritty. They wanted to keep the sex happening. But as you've seen, the sex is much less about prostitutes and much more about, I hooked up with this woman who was interested in doing this with me, who wants this as much as I do. So there are a lot of things that were cleaned up, and I'm sure it had to be deliberate. And so there are still some elements and some characters that I'm not huge on, but I don't watch this with, like, you know when you watch something and you like it, but there's kind of like, you've kind of got like a muscle tensed inside because you just know something's coming? I can watch The Legend of Vox Machina without that muscle being clenched. I can't watch the original. I can't rewatch the original stream without being like, something's gonna come. Something's gonna happen. It's an old British space comedy from the late 80s, early 90s. That sounds great. I tried to get into the beginning and had to try again later. Yes. Also, like, look, the first... So, number one, Vox Machina, the first campaign, like, it starts without preamble in the middle of a crawl through the Underdark, which had a lot of problematic themes to start with. There was a disruptive player, which was causing tension around the table, which is really awkward. And then there's this wonderful, low-budget, early streaming chaos. The mics are off, the sound is off, Everything crackles. No one quite knows how to behave on camera. They're just constantly shoveling pizza and food into their face. The filming is being interrupted because fans have bought them a pizza, and there's just like 3 whole pizzas that just appear in the middle of the table. So minis are being knocked over as people are grabbing slices. Like, it is chaotic and hilarious and definitely has that like friends around the table vibe, but also it's kind of difficult to watch at points.
Right.
Because mics are crackling and everyone's just eating, so suddenly you're hungry too, and so early Critical Role is definitely a different experience to current Critical Role. And I say that with good and bad. Like, as beautiful as the new set is, I kind of find a lot of the light changing and the new set's a little distracting for me. It's so cool, it is beautiful. I kind of want the Campaign 2 setting back. I kind of want the Campaign 2 table back. That's me personally. No tea, no shade. If you love the new one, I get it. It's super immersive for some people. For me, it goes from immersive to being distracting because all of this is happening. I think it's interesting that there's this idea that you have to be perfect before you start. Yeah, no. If you... And I have yelled at other people about this. If you want to start streaming, be it video games, tabletop, don't go out and invest in the highest, biggest everything. Like, don't do it. Don't go out and buy the highest. Spend your money on lights. Buy yourself 2, probably 3 good light, or 2 good lights and a ring light for your camera. Get a decent webcam. Your mic for your headset's probably fine. If you want to if you really want to start spending your money, no matter how good your camera is, if your lighting is bad, your picture's going to be bad. Invest in good audio, invest in good lights. After that, then look at your setup and see what you want to invest in. But you don't have to be perfect. Critical Role took off when it was terrible. They had chat scrolling actively on the side while they were playing. Just everything that could have gone wrong on the Critical Role set absolutely went wrong. And look, I'm also going to say this because I know too many people. I have battled too many people going, we're going to run a tabletop game, and it's going to be like friends sitting around a table, and it's just going to be like you and your friends sitting around a table, and that's what Critical Role did not take off because it was friends sitting around a table. Critical Role took off because it was incredible storytelling with incredible players and really good voice actors. You probably can't be Critical Role because only Critical Role can be Critical Role. But you're not going to have massive success because it's people sitting around the table. Most D&D games of just friends around a table are not that much fun to watch. You need really good players. Your players are more important than anything else when it comes to running a TTRPG stream. I even thought watching through Critical Role live shows was the opposite. Yeah, like, Critical Role live shows, I loved and hate, right? I love them. There's this awesome energy watching the crowd. You haven't, did you get to any of the live shows, David?
I saw the intro to one where they all, like, had costumes.
I mean, that's every Critical Role live show.
Right, so not really.
So there was this great energy that happened because they'd be playing, and like, so Marisha has dice by this incredible dice maker Gil, and they're like metal dice. And she'd be getting ready to roll, and she'd be like, "Don't fuck me, Gil," and then she'd roll the dice but no one really understood who Gil was. Like, that hadn't been put out. So they just knew that when Marisha rolled, she said, "Don't fuck me, Gil." So they're at the first live show. Bye, Steve. Thank you so much for hanging out. They're at the first live show, and she's rolling her dice, and she's getting ready to roll, and the whole audience just yells, "Don't fuck me, Gil!" And she's like,
right,
this isn't a Gil dice, but like, and you saw, and they'd get into a groove, right? And they'd say something. They'd say like, "It's been a while," and then they'd pause, and the entire audience would go, "It's been a while," and they're all joining in, and it's like a call and repeat. And so it's a different kind of organized chaos, and it's so fun to watch, but it's also like, I can't hear them.
Right.
What's happening?
It's like when I go to Super Bowl parties. Everyone's there for the commercials. I'm there watching football. I'm like, it's great there are all these people here. It's great but can we maybe watch some football? No, the answer is no, we
Yeah.
cannot.
I'm going to circle real quick because we were talking earlier about things that get lost and have to get lost in the translation from um, the stream to the animated series. And one of those things is a lot of the really weird random humor has to get left behind because humor breaks tension. We've spent a lot of time talking about horror tension because we played Godplane, which is a 8-part horror campaign, which Jen in the chat played in with me. David and I co-ran on Gaming Trends channel. And we spent a lot of time like, how do we build this up? How do we give people breaks, allow them to come down, but also maintain the tension in a good way through the show? And one of the things that happens in Legend of in this arc is there's a sun tree. There's this huge tree, and Keyleth the druid casts speak with plants and has discussions with the tree, and it's handled beautifully in the show. I won't say how, right? But in the animated series, it's beautifully done. It gets the point across, and it's a really cool approach to like how would this plant. But in the stream, it's Matt Mercer reacting to his wife in the middle of a really tense situation when they have, and what happens in, 12 minus 2, 10 episodes in this was months and months of streams in real time. And so she like casts speak with plants, puts her hands on the sun tree, and she's like, "Hey, sun tree," and Matt comes back with like, "Hey, Keyleth," and like the sun tree's just like chilling in the quad. You want to play some hacky sack?
You're right.
Like, so yeah, I graduated from Berkeley, and then I like headed out this way. And part of me, when we got to that point, as a fan of the show, was so disappointed that we didn't get hippie sun tree. But then part of me is also like, that wouldn't have worked in this moment.
Yeah, it would have
at all.
Flat.
It would have ruined everything, especially with Keyleth's struggles in that moment. So, again, you asked like what's different about the show. Well, there's lots of differences. There's lots of little things that have changed, but then there's other things that have been called back and have been, the doors problem. They could never get Vax would always roll a frickin' nat 1 on the lockpicks every time. Like, doors always went wrong. Or if he did roll well, it's like, yes, you pop the lock, but it's bolted from the inside.
Oof. Oof. Big oof.
Yeah. So there were a lot of moments that were called back to, and maybe they didn't make it in. I have no doubt at some point someone's going to call the sun tree a hippie or something like that. Like, so there's a lot of little things that, yes, they weren't included, but I also feel like you couldn't have done them without them getting lost in translation.
Also, I love all the little cameos of people.
Yes.
Because I was watching it and someone would start speaking, I'd be like, I know that voice from somewhere. Where is that voice from?
Yep. Yeah, that was one of the most fun, like funny in the moment but frustrating parts of my interview. Was I got to ask Laura, Taliesin, and Liam, like, who was your favorite background character to voice? And they're all like, it's a spoiler. I can't tell you, it's a spoiler. But also, there are hidden cameos of the actors themselves hidden throughout the series. They have animated themselves into.
I will have to go back and watch again more closely. And there are too many, especially animated shows, there are too many animated shows where the background is an afterthought.
Yeah, not the case here.
And I feel like, so I've always had a big focus about storytelling in my personal career, and part of what makes the visual mediums, film, TV, video games, really compelling is all of the different stories that get told. Like, one of the best examples of this is The Good Place. In The Good Place, it's not just the set that tells the story, how they chose frozen yogurt for the setting.
And all the punny restaurants and...
Right. And it's not just how... but costume design plays a huge role, not just in defining their personalities, but you can see their personalities evolve over the course of the show by what they wear. And so we're not just talking about like the famous, I remember years ago playing one of the Lara Croft games, and in a cutscene she gets like cut across her ribs and cuts through her clothes, and then when you get back into the game she still has that damage, and so the further you get into the game the more beat up she gets because of all the things that she's doing. And it was a really cool detail that wasn't really in previous games, and even now you can play a lot of games where that sort of thing isn't folded in. But whether the score is telling a story, whether the costume design, set design, props, all sorts of things, especially stuff in the background, that not just lends itself to the brilliance of the show, but also gives people who watch it more than once a whole lot.
I don't remember if it's in the first 2 episodes or if it's shortly after that, but there's a moment where someone's laying on a table. And if you look, it's a weird table. And it's actually the Critical Role table from Campaign 2 where they play. They actually, because Matt has like this recessed, it's a 2-sided, and like Matt sits like in this recessed, and it's that actual table they have snuck into the set. So there's all of these cool little details. And in fact, in Campaign 3, Laudna has ties to Whitestone, and that's all I will say to that, and is this kind of creepy, gothy character. And not everyone has seen past episode 2, so I'm going to word this carefully. So, but in the lineup of people who are going to the Sun Tree, there's one character who looks kind of gothy and has like a long black braid. And the entire fandom is like, Laudna, is that you? And I don't think it is, but even if it's not, it's such a cool like teaser Easter egg that it's like, oh, you knew exactly what you were doing with this, didn't you?
And there's only one example I can think of, but in most examples where little details are added in and all the different aspects of the storytelling are allowed their independence to contribute their own stories to it, it always comes out with a really incredible product.
Yeah.
Like, I've never said the score of this movie was really good, but the movie was terrible. And there was one instance I can think of where I went, oh man, the visual effects people and the special effects people really went the extra mile and really did so much for this movie to be this terrible.
Yeah.
And it's also true in a lot of games, and it's nice as a consumer and as a fan to see that fans are the ones who are building this for you. Like, when you could see that they're like, we know you watched this before, so we're gonna put this in, and this is just for you. You're gonna notice this, and no one else is.
Yeah.
And and that's a big difference between like the DC films and the Marvel films. Is the Marvel films put little stuff in there and are like, okay, all of you turbo nerds that have read 250 issues of X-Men, well, in issue 179 on one panel, there's this weird thing that happens, and we're putting that in this movie. Whereas in like DC films, there's a wink and a nod to the comic books, but then they immediately betray that vision, and you're just like, don't. And even Marvel, before they really like got together, there was just there's a difference between an earnest referencing and pandering.
Yeah.
And it comes down to respect and passion. Like, if the people who are making it, and a show where you have 8 creative directors, and you can tell, like, there were lots of little moments in Vox Machina where I went, okay, they did this, but this isn't what was written on the page.
Yeah.
They put that in front of them, and they recorded it, and they went, nope. And then they let the actors go, okay, what would your character say in this situation?
I've got a fun factoid for you.
I'm here for it.
The bartender at the very first tavern was a completely fan-made character. A fan won a contest and asked for this character to be designed. And that was the barkeep.
That explains how the bartender just looked a little bit, not out of place, but just a little bit discordant with like everything else. Yeah, it totally makes sense. Good job. And again, if I didn't know that wouldn't have impacted my enjoyment of the show.
Right.
But I'm really, really, really glad they put that in there.
Yeah.
Like, there are tons of things that I'm sure I missed over the course of the episodes, but I'm glad all that stuff is in there, because that also informs the overall product.
So we are going to start winding this down. Also, David, put your finger up to your camera. It's gone fuzzy.
Oh.
We're going to wind this down a little bit, but yeah, if you have any, you got to put your hand and then bring it back. Bring it back. If you have any last questions about The Legend of Vox Machina, if you've seen it or not, I can talk spoiler-free about the last 3 episodes. Have to talk very carefully around it. It's not stressful at all. My do not talk about list is very, very long. I did also, I'm going to back it up real quick. If you have another favorite D&D adaptation or tabletop adaptation in television or screen media, you're going to laugh, David. David always laughs at me and rolls his eyes and is judgy because he doesn't want to like it. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, did a brilliant episode about D&D. Oh no!
I can't. Am I back? Okay, good. Yeah, I can't. Listen.
Oh, we may have lost.
I respect.
David. There you're back. Your internet's being real grumpy.
Yes. But.
Might have to wrap this up because I don't think we can keep David for more than like 3 words.
Okay, it should be fine now.
Okay.
But everyone that I respect has told me that about My Little Pony, and that it's good, and including
at least for a while. At least for a while.
Including like Star Trek tie-ins, and all that's really, really great. Except there are bronies out there, and I cannot let anyone suspect for even the tiniest moment that I am among their kin. Never.
It's just a little too close to home to be able to tolerate that.
So I can't.
No,
I'm weird enough as is. I don't need anybody drawing any other associations with me.
So, for those like David who have not seen and do not intend to, there's an excellent episode where like all the ponies are the lady ponies are leaving town, and Discord, who is a discordant figure who's a villain turned maybe not villain, it's kind of hard to tell for a lot of the show, is hanging back with Spike and Big Mac, who are one of the few boys who are in the series. And they're like, we're going to have a boys' night. Do you want to hang out? You want to do boys' night with me? And so Discord is like, oh yeah, we're going to party. We're going to paint the town. Like, he's got all this in his head about what's going to happen. And then he rolls up to the boys' night, and they've got a D&D board. They've got the sheets. They're going to play D&D. And Discord is so upset about this. And he keeps trying to, like, drive them different places. And then when all they want to do is play D&D, he gets mad and he, like, he puts them into the game. Everything's cardboard cutouts. Like, they're in the D&D game, which is great. Everyone really likes until he didn't turn off Pain. So, it was one of the, like, better, like, it's definitely not Vox Machina, but it's actually one of the more fun, better depictions of what D&D is. Also, Voltron, the new one, did an entire episode. Also, the My Little Pony one was Ogres and Ooglians. But Voltron did an entire episode. I can't believe I didn't think of this sooner. Voltron did an entire episode where they're playing a tabletop game, super futuristic tabletop version, and all that the Black Lion wants to do is he just wants to play Paladin. And they're like, you can play whatever. He's like, I want to play Paladin. And his character dies. He's like, I'm going to come back and play Paladin. And they're like, you are a Paladin. Play something else. He's like, I just like playing Paladins.
Right. He's like, no, I've found what I'm looking for here.
And Lance, the annoying one. I'm sorry, Lance is the annoying one. Lance has cat ears. Because of course Lance has cat ears. It was so good. It was so full of D&D tropes and so good. I love Pidge. Really Pidge's character, top notch. Like, yeah, Voltron D&D episode was also excellent.
Yeah, there were a couple of small moments in Voltron where I felt a little attacked, and I don't know how I feel about that, but it's fine.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this as carefully as I can for anyone who's not seen Voltron, but I started watching Voltron. And I was like, gee, I really like this show. I'm like an episode or two in. I'm like, gee, I really like this show. Everyone's pretty great, except for Lance. I just, if Pidge were if Pidge were a girl, the show would be perfect. And that was my complaint about Voltron.
And then
you don't say anything.
Yeah. But no, highly recommended. I would say that I wasn't super pleased with the last season.
Oh no, that did not stick. You want a show that stuck the landing, an animated show that stuck the landing. She-Ra stuck the landing. I feel like they did a D&D. They did like a planning sequence where one of their little mini plans was a D&D thing. But no, She-Ra stuck the landing. Sure. Voltron was really good most of the way through, did not stick the landing.
Yeah. But it was fine. It was good enough.
It was good. I enjoyed it.
If you want to watch giant robots slap things,
I've got a whole
Voltron
rant.
is there for you.
I've got a whole rant about what Voltron did for shippers that I'm not even going to go into on this stream because that's a whole other conversation. One I'm not sure I want to have on stream. So, if you have any final thoughts or comments about Vox Machina or any shows that have D&D adaptations or tabletop adaptations in them, please shout it out. So far, I think still our reigning king is Clue.
Yes.
Like Clue and Vox Machina. Clue for movies, Vox Machina for small screen, and then Voltron and My Little Pony, and that's kind of what we got. They didn't really go super deep into the playing, but Stranger Things, can't forget Stranger Things. No, you're perfect, Jen. You.
Right.
You. I mean, not Nobby. Nobby is still terrifying, but.
To go check out Jen's stream under Youngles. In Borderlands 2, one of the expansions was Bunkers and Badasses.
Ah, yes, I remember seeing that.
Run by Tiny Tina. And I'd argue it's the best expansion out of all the expansions for Borderlands 2. It was just and they hit a lot of the tropes, like especially on the player side,
Mm.
um, in it, and the sort of storytelling things that happen. Did a really good job. And shout out to Ashley Burch, who has played on Critical Role and
Yes.
also voiced Tiny Tina.
She's the most popular guest character on Critical Role.
Yikes.
I'll tell you what happens later. I'm not spoiling that on this
Yes.
stream.
Yes.
Yeah, no. I love Ashley Burch. Also, if you have not seen Raven Quest, look. I work in video games. Raven Quest is to video games what Silicon Valley is to Silicon
Oof.
Valley.
Oof.
Like, you're
Oof.
like, yes, this is exaggerated, but only this much, and it's really
only a
uncomfortable to
smidge.
watch. And Ashley Burch not only stars in that, she co-write it or co-produce? She's one of the bigwigs on it and just deserves all the credit because she's just amazing. It's so good. And the community manager the clip about the girl who says, I want to do what you do. Ooh, it hits too close to home. It hits too close to home.
Yeah.
They have a measurement of TTP, and yes, that is an actual thing that happens in the games industry. I have used this term in a meeting. So yeah, I think that about sums that up. If you are a Critical Role nerd and you have not seen my interview, I got to interview the cast, including Matt Mercer, about Legend of Vox Machina. It's posted on Gaming Trend. If you go to gamingtrend.com, it is one of the trending articles at the top. It is also up there with my spoiler-free first impressions of the first 6 episodes. I also have spoiler-free first impressions of the next 3 episodes, and posted today my spoiler-free of the final 3 episodes, which I had to talk very carefully about. Legend of Vox Machina, the last 3 episodes, comes out Friday, so you are very close to just being able to binge all of it. It's got an ending, and let me tell you about the ending it has. It's a lot. They also, I will say this carefully, there's a couple things that happen in the final episode and a half episode that I don't necessarily know how much like someone who hasn't seen the stream will pick it up, but the seeds for what is to come are so very clearly planted for everyone who knows what's coming. And the next arc is going to be so much fun. Speaking of this lovely person we have hanging out in our chats, on Sundays,
Yep.
Jen and I are on a Mothership RP stream over on Todd Moonbounce's channel. If you watch Dimension 20, Todd Moonbounce is a not just credited, but named called out consultant on Starstruck, which is the new Dimension 20 sci-fi show. So it looks great. It's really fun. Things just got ratcheted up last week. Holy cats. I get to play this really... I mean, I guess they're creepy, but they don't mean to be creepy. Android, which Jen's character refurbished, because I was broken. So that's fun. That's going to be fine. Nothing bad is happening there. It's only sci-fi survival horror, so, like, clearly nothing bad is going to happen there. It's totally not a problem that I'm an illegal android who's not supposed to have free will. It's all totally cool. David, do you have anything you get to promote?
Not yet, because the next thing that I have coming out is the next thing that we have coming out that we are still working on.
Well,
but
then
there will be more information about that in the coming weeks.
Since we are focusing on Critical Role, I am actively recruiting for the Call of the Netherdeep is coming out next month, and I fully intend to run Call of the Netherdeep. So if you are a Critical Role nerd, want to play a campaign inside, it starts in Wildmont. If you want to play a Critical Role campaign, I have a Discord. The chat has been talking about it. Hop in the Discord. I've got a casting call open. We're going to be playing Tuesday nights, unless something really, really strange happens. And
yep.
Yeah, let's get Wildmount. And Sunday nights, you can find me on Todd Mood Bounce's channel playing Creepy Robot. I've got another project that I'm filming right now that I can't talk about that I'll hopefully be able to talk about soon, coming spring, late spring, early summer. Real excited to share that. That's going to be fun. And
Pokemon Days.
Pokemon Days. You can find me every Monday. I do shiny hunts right now. Hopping between Arceus and Sword and Shield. I give away perfect Pokemon as well as extra shiny Pokemon. I have a ridiculously full living shiny dex. It's at 96 point something %, so I'm trying to get all of those shinies. And then every Tuesday.
We're not going to talk about how long that took.
Look, no, we're not. I've only been at this for a decade. Like, nah. We're not going to talk about how many hours of my life I've sunk into Pokemon, because it's possibly more than I've set into tabletop, and that's a problem. And then Tuesday and D, every Tuesday, I'm here if we are either here talking about tabletop games or playing a tabletop game. So come on by. And thank you all for hanging out. Thank you, Bardley.io, for the music you've heard chilling in the background. Thank you to Web Captions for the amazing captions below. Yay, accessibility. We're always open for ways to improve the stream. If you know of a better captioning program, we would love to hear about it. David, anything else?
Nope, that is it. Make sure you guys come to see us next week.
Thank you all. Thank you for hanging out and chatting. And there is... What's happening over at Dungeons... Oh! They're playing Knights of the Evening Star over on the official Dungeons & Dragons channel. So we're going to send y'all over there, and you can go watch some people actually playing D&D, not just talking about it.
Awesome.
So... Have a good night, Jen. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. Be kind to yourselves. Have a good night. And we'll see you next Tuesday.